Hey guys, what is going on? Welcome to another episode of Creepypasta Readings. This episode I'm going to be doing FunnyMouth, one of my favorite creepypastas. Another one of my favorite creepypastas was the Abandoned by Disney creepypasta that I did before. I usually don't do an intro to these, but I just want to ask you guys what you think about these creepypasta readings. If I should continue them, and if I shouldn't, what I should do. If you have any suggestions on what I should do, leave a comment below and I'll get on them, I guess. And without further ado, this is FunnyMouth. The first thing I should probably note is that I'm Lemon Limeskull. In other words, that's my screen name up there. That was the first time I saw or heard from FunnyMouth. For all purposes, it should have been the last. Anyone who spends enough time chatting away knows that weirdos come and go, folks pop in and ask insane questions, or just troll-populated channels. What first struck me as odd about this guy, however, was the fact that he came in with no particular goal. He didn't try to piss anyone off, he didn't ask anyone on the channel if he knew how to fix a computer or remove a virus. He just stuck his head in, rattled off some random text, and happily fucked off. I don't know what results I expected from pursuing this guy to another channel. I'm not the type that goes out of his way to annoy or argue with people. I'll usually try to avoid it at all costs. Though when someone starts with me, I don't mind getting into it at that point. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I have no idea why I pursued this. He was just sitting there, in the channel, by himself. I actually chuckled out loud at this point. He was weird and inoffensive. And with that, I left. The act got old fast, and I felt either this was someone trying way too hard, or a legitimate moron who is just unaware of how to properly use a chat program. Sitting idly by herself, popping into other channels for a split second, seemed like a desperate bid for attention. I might have done that and laughed my ass off in or around the 90s, but yeah, stupid. Silence dominated the channel for about a half hour as I minimized the window and went about my business. Anyone on? Nothing. 8 users in the channel, not a single one active. It took me a few seconds to see it. FunnyMouth again. Staring. I physically slumped my shoulders with a "not this shit again" sigh. Then I noticed something. He wasn't in the channel. Obviously, it was a glitch with my client or the server. The message was just simply kicked up from earlier in the night at random. These things happen, you know. But still, it creeped the hell out of me. After a few minutes of sitting there with a really cold, creepy feeling in my stomach, that I shouldn't have done something feeling, I decided to stop trying to brave it out and just close the entire chat program. Sure, I could have just hung in there like everything was fine, but why bother trying to prove I wasn't spooked. Hell, nobody was even around to see me slink away. After a few more hours of screwing around on the web, I went to bed around 2:40 a.m. One thing I've always prided myself on is that I do not have nightmares. At least, not regularly. Usually, if there's monsters or ghosts or nuclear wars in my dream, I get to control it and have a great time. I'm shooting zombies in the face, outright telling ghosts they're not real while I laugh at them. And if there's some disaster, I always know how to get to the safe spots while every other mother effer fries. I've had maybe actually 4 nightmares in the past 10 years, and yes, I'm completely serious. The first nightmare I had of my adult life was in 2005. I had just broken off a relationship with someone who had been with someone else for over a year behind my back. That night, when I finally did get to sleep, I dreamt she was strapped down to a medical table while some sort of unseen, inexplicable creature sucked out her brain with an organic machine. The brain screamed ceaselessly. The second nightmare had me visiting a medical facility where they had experimented with a few new methods of saving lives. There was a fantastic tour of this high-tech facility, lots of wanderers of modern science, people in lab coats, etc. Then I was led to a room where 3 car crash victims had been saved by their techniques. This included a slowly rocking young girl whose face had been completely disoriented and hung around her chest, and a woman who was nothing but a cluster of twitching severed limbs, held together by a drawn-out, kite-like span of flesh. The third came soon after the second. I was being accosted by 2 people, one who wanted to insult me to no end, and the other who kept trying to pinch and tweak me in absurd, ineffective ways. Thinking I could control this dream, I set the 2 men against each other, thinking it would be sort of like poetic justice. Instead, the pincher became increasingly more violent until he was pulling at the other's cheeks, grabbing his tongue with a fist and furiously pulling at it until it came out, and the other pulled the fellow's eyelids until they disconnected in some sort of grotesque prolapse. I suppose what I'm getting at is that even when I did have nightmares, I was never actually the target of any sort of horror. It's always been a kind of empathetic horror related to someone else getting brutalized. This nightmare, however, was different. As soon as I fell asleep, I started dreaming. Basically, it was a recurring dream that I have where I'm in the woods, just checking out animals and birds, and generally acting chill. I lie in the grass and look up to the sky. It's always a dream I welcome, because even if I had a shit day, I'll wake up happy and ready to start over. This time, the script changed. I laid in the grass, but while I was staring at the sky, I felt something odd. It was a cold, squirming feeling on my neck. In the dream, I reached to my neck and pulled away a long, wriggling earthworm. Worms disgusted me. If I see one in the yard, I'll get a shovel and heap dirt over it, so I simply don't accidentally see it again. Disgusted, but more or less content, I flung the worm aside and continued my dream. Then, that feeling again, clammy, wet, wriggling against the side of my neck. I pulled it away. Another earthworm. Again it happened. The third time, the feeling of confusion and dread became so overwhelming that I immediately snapped myself out of the dream. That's what usually happens when shit gets real in my dreams. Game over. I figured it out, though at least I thought I had. In the waking world, I felt my neck and discovered a slick, slimy film on my skin. Logic dictated that I must have been drooling in my sleep. Nothing to be proud of, but not exactly terrifying either. My dreaming mind must have translated the icky feeling into an appropriate creature in the forest dream. Perhaps more unsettling, though, was that the fact that the bed around me seemed to have indentations, 4 to be exact. It was almost as if someone on hands and knees had been hovering over me as I slept. There was a number of reasons that could have happened, but from then on at night, I slept very lightly. Any little thing, like the sound of a ceiling fan, would wake me up straight away. I had no real interest in going back to the woods that night. When morning came around, I got ready to take off, to get out of the house and shake the cobwebs out. I only planned to check my email real quick to make sure I didn't have any pending transactions or questions I had to answer. Surprise! What happens next is a series of emails from FunnyMouth to Charles Watts and vice versa. What is going to happen, I will read who it's from, who it's to, and then the email. From FunnyMouth@blood.com to Charles Watts. I had a good time to talk to you. It can be fun again. You'll see what. I don't like, stop it. As you probably recall, I hadn't given this asshat my email address. However, Logic answered, someone else on the channel must have. He obviously came back into reverse sales and asked someone who I was, and that douchebag completely betrayed me knowing I don't give out my personal contact info. Although, the email was dated 2:40 a.m. That was pretty much the moment when I went to bed, when everyone else on the channel was still idle. Even though I well and truly knew I was taking some sort of bait, I responded. From Charles Watts to FunnyMouth@blood.com. Yeah bro, I'm not exactly sure I want you emailing me. It was clear and to the point. There was no mistaking the message I was sending. And though it was snippy, I wasn't goading him into replying by starting a flame war. But of course, from FunnyMouth@blood.com, Charles Watts. Come on, don't be so sad about it. I know you can like it. We'll have fun. A lot of the time. It's okay even. And with that, I blocked his address. Really, I should have done that in the first place, but I still had some sick sort of interest in exactly where this was going. Maybe if I put my foot down, he would admit he was just screwing around and call me a humorless wet blanket. When I saw it was the same old bullshit, that gave me the green light to go ahead and shut the guy out. For what it's worth, you can relax at this point. The blocking stuck. There's no follow-up message circumventing the ban. After a few minutes, I assured myself that it was all over and went about my day. It wasn't until I got home at dusk that cold, squirming feeling inside my stomach started all over again, and I had no idea why. Well, that's not entirely true. I had some idea. I checked my email, but nothing from that FunnyMouth guy. However, there was an email from George. From George G. to Charles Watts. Hey, reverse sales is fucked up. I can't get shit to load. When you're online, please take a look. ASAP. Peace and carrots, George. I let out a string of curses, downtime, and lost sales. And I'd been out all day with no way of George contacting me. If I'd been a little less strict with my personal info, he could have just called me. I loaded the site and waited for some sort of error screen. Instead, it began a reroute to another page. Blood.com. From Charles Watts to George G. Yeah, I see it. It's redirecting me to a website with a giant pixelated face with a messed up tongue. I think it's that FunnyMouth guy again. P.O.S. Did you give him my email address with the domain in it? CW. From George G. to Charles Watts. It's a 404 page, not a redirect, and I want what you're smoking. All I get is a blood.com coming soon notice, and I also didn't give anyone shit. George. Charles Watts to George G. Har har har, very funny. Then, George emailed me a screenshot of the site giving a 404 error, along with a coming soon notice for blood.com. He could have easily faked them, but why? I mean, if this was some sort of joke, it was pretty abstract and I didn't get it. When I looked at my website files, nothing was out of the normal. Nothing was out of place, and nobody had even logged in to change anything. I checked the domain names, name servers, the thing that routes the domain to where it's supposed to go, and nothing was out of sorts. Still, there it was, this bloated tongue, wagging face looking back at me with its empty eye sockets. Then, I don't know how I missed it in the first place. Looking closely at the picture, the face wasn't really pixelated. It was made of tiny letters, HTML code coloring, each letter specific to the image. Over and over again, the word made up the image was right in front of me. FunnyMouth, 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 FunnyMouth. And a great cluster of nonsense. I felt like spitting at the screen. I unblocked his email address and set about writing this incredibly profane and threatening letter. I didn't really care if I got the site back at this point. I wanted to get everything off my chest so I could feel like I was in control of the situation again. Before I could finish the letter, I just got this weird, creepy feeling that, no, it couldn't be feeling again. Feeling where you could be absurd, but at the same time, you know you're right. I stopped hacking out my death threats and checked the inbox. From FunnyMouth at blood.com to Charles Watts. I see your handsome face. From FunnyMouth at blood.com to Charles Watts. Hello, buddy. From FunnyMouth at blood.com to Charles Watts. Come on. From FunnyMouth at blood.com to Charles Watts. Hello. From FunnyMouth at blood.com to Charles Watts. Hello, hello, hello. From FunnyMouth at blood.com to Charles Watts. I don't want to not. From FunnyMouth at blood.com to Charles Watts. I don't think about it. Please, though. From FunnyMouth at blood.com to Charles Watts. I see your handsome face. Not only was that feeling correct, the feeling that he had already emailed me the minute I unblocked him, but he seemed to be steadily emailing me non-stop since I unblocked him. Then 10 more letters arrived just within the time span and took me to reply. Just fucking stop! I was getting a stress headache. My heart was pounding. Not from fear, but rage. This was probably the most absurdly infuriating person on the internet, and that's saying a lot. Thankfully, the string of emails did indeed stop. I tried to calm myself down, breathing deeply, but it didn't seem to take. I was still incredibly pissed. Slowly and methodically, I sent him another note. From Charles Watts to FunnyMouth at blood.com. Hi. I don't understand what you're saying, and I do not understand what you want. I think there may be a language barrier. Is your first language English? I think you have done something to my website, and I would like you to undo it. If you are mad at me, I didn't intend this to happen. You may have misunderstood what I said, or what I meant. Please change my website back, and let's both go our separate ways. Thank you, CW. I waited and waited. I thought about how I conquered my anger, and that this measured response was really the best way to go about it. This fellow would understand what I meant. He'd realize the mistakes he had made. Then I calmed down. Everything was going to be okay. But then, from FunnyMouth at blood.com to Charles Watts, staring face. I hit the roof. I hit the goddamn roof and went clear through it. I smacked the monitor with my palm, knocking it clear off the desk. That pissed me off even more, as I drove my fists into the keyboard repeatedly until the keys flew free. I screamed out in a mixture of frustration and anger with myself, and rage over the situation, and stomped out of the room, knocking down everything and everything I could get my hands on. For as long as I could manage the energy, I laid waste to my own shit. I would have started a fire and burn the fucking place down if I had a lighter. That night, I stared at the ceiling fan for what felt like an eternity before sleep came. Waiting for sleep, I knew I was going to have a nightmare. I just knew it. That was how my luck was just going. Imagine how surprised I was, even in sleep, when instead of some horrific setting, I was in someplace safe. The woods. I laid in the grass again. I felt the relaxation. I knew, even my subconscious knew, that everything would be okay, no matter what setbacks in life threw at me. The world would go on. Nothing was permanent. Everything was in transition. Nobody could really get to me. Then, I felt the squirming on my neck again. Nope. No dice. Nothing could spoil this right now. I ignored the worm. It would go away. I felt the squirming move to my mouth. Now, I couldn't will myself awake. Every other time, I'd be able to decide to wake up. But it seemed like that opportunity had passed now. Then it wasn't a worm. It was a finger. Then another, and another, until 4 slimy, squirming digits were locked around my teeth, clutching my lower jaw. It didn't hurt when it happened. It was just sort of like a pop. More pressure than pain. It was quick, and before I even knew what was going on, it was over. I managed to force myself awake. I sat up and got to my feet in complete darkness. Feeling my way around the walls, I made my way into the bathroom. There, I finally flicked on a light switch. I stood there before my mirror, rubbing my eyes as the harsh light blinded me. I stared into the mirror for minutes on end with no reaction. No feeling, no thoughts. Then I smiled. I smiled as best I could. Now that my jaw was completely broken, hanging loose around my neck, my tongue lolled out listlessly, like a paralyzed gooey slug. My teeth weren't rooted anymore, in anything but threads of flesh. I could just pull them out with one hand, about the same discomfort as a needle prick. I laughed, the halting sound coming out of the gurgled, backed-up sewer drain. What a handsome face! What a funny mouth! A funny mouth? A funny mouth? Funny mouth? Funny mouth.